People aren't thinking about you nearly as much as you think they are because they're too busy thinking about themselves.
You are now tuning in to the Roughnecks Podcast with your host, Cole Nixon. Much love.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Roughnecks Podcast. I do not know exactly what episode number this is. I always get confused on which is which anymore, but joining me today is another recommendation from Chad Dennis. Can't say enough about the things that he is, the things that he's helped me with, but it's a recommendation from Chad Dennis, and the last one brought on a great episode, so I'm very sure that this one will as well. So without further ado, Julie Jones, welcome to the Roughnecks Podcast.
Thanks. Thanks, Chad. I'll thank Chad the next time I see him.
Yeah, I think originally when I recorded with him the very first time he mentioned you, and then I do work with Ohio Stingrays, the softball organization, and we had a meeting one time and he texted me and told me about you again, and I think it's one that he really wanted to hear me talk to you apparently. So I'm excited to have you on, and especially you and Chad do similar things in terms of we'll get into what it is, but so I'm excited to kind of dive into it. I'm actually recording Thursday. So this Thursday, I'm recording with him and Dan Davis of Mindset Matters Athletics. I've recorded with both of them separately, but this time I'm bringing them together I want to get them together to talk. So, but just to kind of kick off the episode, I allow the guests to give a background on themselves because I will never do it justice. So to kind of just tell the Roughnecks listeners who you are.
Okay. Well, I'm sitting at Akron Firestone High School, so you can see a swimming hall of fame behind me, and I have nothing to do with that except for the fact that my son swims here. But I spent my career coaching Division I softball. I started as a graduate assistant at Cleveland State University, and within 3 years I became the head coach. And at the time, I was the youngest Division I coach in the country. So I think I was cheap and available. So that's how it all started. And fortunately, my first year as the head coach, we won the championship. So that's a pretty good way to get the job. So I spent 13 years in Cleveland, and then we did really well again. And we had the opportunity then to move to the University of Akron, and I spent 13 years coaching there. And after I left coaching, I had spent a lot of time working with Dr. Sue Ziegler, who was our sports psychologist at Cleveland State. She was my mentor. She helped me, particularly as a young coach. And I knew that the mental side of the game was something that was extremely important, and it's something that really interested me. So I went and got certified as a mindset mental performance coach. And I started my own business right out of the gate in 2019. That led to working with teams, businesses, CEOs, athletes all over the country. And it also led me to start teaching at the University of Akron. So I teach in sports science and I teach the psychology of coaching. Right now I'm teaching a positive team culture class and a couple others. So I haven't left the Akron campus, just in a different role. And I get to talk about the mental side of the game, and softball and football and basketball, you name it, and sales and things like that every day. So it's awesome. My career as a softball coach I knew I wanted to do that from the 8th grade on. So it was exactly where I was supposed to be for all those years, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I want to start with the coaching side of things. What kind of drove you to get into coaching? Because I feel like everybody kind of has, a different story, but they kind of are similar at the same time. What drove you to want to get into coaching? And, especially, did you always know you wanted to do it at the college level, or did you want to, do high school or, youth sports per se, or was college kind of always your dream and passion in the play? Obviously, I feel like as a coach, you always want to get to the highest level per se, but, what kind of drove that?
Well, it's funny, when I told my mom that I was going to be a college softball coach, she thought it was the dumbest idea ever. She was not on board. She says, what are you going to do? You're going to teach, and then, I'm like, Mom, I don't know. This is what I want to do. I knew that I wanted to coach in college. In fact, in my senior book, I have those little books where you write things down. It says, "Where will you be in 5 years?" And I said, "I'll be a graduate assistant at a Division I school," and I was. That's how it worked out. But the whole coaching, the love of coaching, truly, I have to give a shout out to my dad. And everybody says my dad, but my dad was a coach, and what really got me sort of, I think, hooked on. Well, I loved softball. I also went to college to play basketball too, so I went to be a dual sport athlete. But what really, I think, was what drove me to want to coach is I used to read the letters and the cards that my dad's athletes would write to him, and they were so heartfelt, and they saw him in such an amazing way, and in the same way that I did. I mean, my dad's awesome. He's driving me crazy right now, but because old guy, but he had such an impact on these young women's lives that they're still, like, he was in the hospital over Christmas, and 4 or 5 of them. So, like, he's 80, almost 84 years old. 4 or 5 of them called and emailed him and texted him to see how he was doing, and that is what really made me passionate about coaching. I love the game. There's no doubt about it. But my mantra or my vision statement or whatever you want to call it was smarter students, stronger athletes, and better people. And it was really about building young women. We didn't win all the time, but what we did do was get to spend time with young people, and that's just an amazing opportunity. It's something that not everybody gets to do. And that's where the passion really started. And of course, I was just a sports junkie. I love sports. And, I mean, like I just told my class at Akron today, I said, I got to wear like sweatpants to work every day. Right. No, at Cleveland State, I actually had to dress up, but at Akron, blue and gold all day long. Right. So, who would want to do that?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it is it's kind of crazy. You don't always notice it as an athlete, but every coach that you have throughout your lifetime leaves some sort of impression on you, whether it be good or bad. Usually most people experience good and bad coaches. Some people are lucky enough to, experience extraordinary coaches, but it's one of those that you don't realize the impact that your coach is leaving on you. And that's something a lot of coaches also need to keep in mind. And I'm sure, like, you got to see it with your dad and everything, is, they're paying attention, like, to the good and bad things. I took a lot of things from my coaches. Some of the things I talk about on this podcast are from my college coaches, from my high school coaches. They're things that have stuck with me my entire life. And, whether it drove me in sports or drove me in life after sports, it still helps, and it is insane the impact that a coach can leave on an athlete.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And if you talk to the kids that played for me, some of them are going to tell you, all the good stuff, and some of them are not. And that's part of it too. But the great part about coaching, I remember I was at a get together with the kids that played for me at Cleveland State, and I remember one of the kids said, I'm sort of disciplined, and what did she say? I can't remember what she said, but I'm like, really? Like, yeah. And then another kid said, like, I'm sort of flying by the seat of my pants. I'm like, really? Like, I know you better than you know you, right? So it's, but that's the cool part about it. And then you get to go see them do these amazing things. I mean, one of my former players delivered my son, right? Like, literally C-section. I had an emergency C-section, and she was the one that delivered him. Like, that is crazy if you think about it, right? And, I mean, whose hands would you want to be in as someone that is really a part of your family, right? So, I always say, like, one of my girls was the first person to lay eyes on my son, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Right. That tells you how old I am or how old I was when I had my son, but either way, right?
So coaching at the Division I level, obviously, and you mentioned too, you were the youngest coach at the time. There's challenges that come with that. What would you say, we'll start with just being a young coach. What was one of the most challenging things as a young, coach?
I think the hardest thing as a young coach is you really don't know what you don't know. I was really fortunate and smart enough to keep a guy named Bob Curtis around with me. He had been the head coach for a year at Akron during a transition. He had coached Akron Hoban High School. He had coached at the University of Akron for a while, so he had tons of experience. He was a fast pitch player himself. And he was an older guy, and people used always go up to him and say, "Hey, they thought he was the head coach," and he would always say, "Nope, it's her over there." But not, like the energy, the excitement, the passion are the advantages, right? It was endless. It was just me, so I had no other distractions. I could think about softball 365 days a year, 24 hours a day if I wanted to. But there's so much that you don't know about the game, about the games that are played in the game, right? I mean, I think back to what I didn't know at the beginning of my career. And in a way, it's like, oh, I feel bad for those kids. But in another way, they got such a passion at me that I think that made up for it.
And at the end of the day, those kids almost help shape your career as well.
Yeah.
That's a lot of things too. We just mentioned the whole thing of, a coach can make an impact on a player, but a player can also make an impact on a
Oh,
coach. Like
yeah.
how many times did that make an effect on your career, whether players making an effect on your career?
Oh, absolutely. And I think about the effect that they still have on me today. I just mentioned to you before we started recording that one of my former players played for me at Cleveland State, so it's been a long time, right? She wants to start a podcast, and she told me I'm doing it with her, right? I mean, now we're going to go into this endeavor together, and it's not just that. I'm sitting in a building where one of my kids is the assistant softball coach, and every time I leave my son's practice, I see her. She's an Akron police officer, and like literally, she is, such a part of my world and my life, and they impacted me then. They helped me grow, right? I grew with them in some ways. But I mean, there are people that I coach that are as important to me in my life as anybody. And a lot of it was their passion and, even their intelligence. And like I learned, like we did academic meetings. I always did them myself with the kids, especially early on. I learned so much from them, right? Just in general, and I still learn from them. So like it's coaching is really such a two-way street. I think a lot of people think they go into coaching to be the boss, right, or to run things. But I mean, truthfully, you're running. I mean, you're making the rules and you're doing all those kinds of things. But there's so much you don't control, And coaches are control freaks, so that's hard. But it's really, I mean, it truthfully is about relationships. That's what it's really about. You watch the good coaches, like my friend and that I've known my whole life. His name is Carl Semesco. He used to be the head coach at Florida Gulf Coast. He just took the job with the Atlanta Dream, and his dad and my dad have been friends forever. But like his girls will run through a wall for him, and that's just relationship building. I think of other guys and women like that, and people give their all to people they care about.
Yeah, it is
So,
true. I mean, you look at you could be a exceptional coach and have like this great playbook. I'm a football guy, so I think of playbooks and
yeah,
stuff like
yeah,
that. If you may have the world's best playbook, but if you don't have the players that are fit for that playbook, it's
that's right.
not going to matter. So it's understanding your players. I like that you really mentioned that. Like having those relationship, you have to know who your players are, because there is no, in sports, one size fits all type of thing. Every sports or everybody's different. You can't just take, if you were to set a batting order based off of just looking at a roster, you never know how it would go. Like
That's
you
right.
really don't know. It's probably not the best choice.
Yeah.
So it is something that I wish, it's one of those things that you have to know your players, and that's a big thing that I feel like some coaches, especially, I can think of some that I grew up playing for, that they missed that aspect. And,
Yeah.
it's not always their fault. It's hard in youth sports maybe to grow a relationship with your athletes when you're only seeing them maybe 2-3 times a week
Right.
max. I mean, nowadays you might be actually seeing them 7 days a week at this point, because youth sports sometimes get a little crazy anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I kind of want to go into the side of things with the mental performance training, and just kind of want to start like how it started, and kind of give me the origin story behind it, and like when did it start, what kind of sparked it, and everything like that.
Well, truthfully, it started in the early 90s when I was in college. And I was really I wrote my senior project on self-esteem and achievement. And then my master's work, we talked about we did self-esteem and aggression. So I've always sort of been in that sort of mindset of what drives high performance. And once you get into coaching, you stop research. You don't look at it from that perspective. But I was as a college player, I had a wonderful coach. She was a wonderful human being, and she really fed into my passions, particularly when I became a coach, and she was so helpful to me. But she gave me a set of cassette tapes by a guy named, I think his name is Dennis Watley, and he was a PhD in psychology. There was sports psychology and Ken Revisit were just sort of breaking into to sports, and I would listen to those tapes every night. I'm a very disciplined individual, and I've done dumb things too, of course. I mean, I don't always make the right choices as a college kid, but if I wanted to do something, I was going to do it. So I would listen to those tapes every single night, put my Walkman on, listen to these tapes and about visualization and self-talk and routines and all these things. And then she gave me a book. It's by Kay Porter. It's called The Mental Athlete. And I read that thing front to back to front. And would read parts of it, pregame and, after games and things like that. So this passion has always been there. And then I was so fortunate that I just happened upon one of the best sports psychologists in the country at Cleveland State, and Dr. Sue Ziegler, who I just got to spend some time with in November, and I'm going to get to again here next month, but long retired, of course. But she took an interest in me. And there's one of my former players right there. Just came around the corner. She heard my voice. She took an interest in me and our team. And she was so good, not only for teaching our kids about focus and about all the tools that I now teach, but she was so good for me. I remember we played Kent State one time and we got our butts kicked. And after the second game, she was there watching, and she came over. She goes, "You know why we lost? You know why we lost?" I said, "Yeah. They scored more runs than we did," right? And she said, "No, we lost because of you." And I was immediately like, oh, you know how you get, you all of a sudden put up that. And I stopped for a second. I thought, you know what, she's trying to tell me something here. So nobody tells the head coach that, right? And she was trying to tell me something. And she said, your attitude, your energy, your presence was so bad, and that reflects on everyone. And I wish I would have had that tattooed on the inside of my eyelids, because I did it again and I did it again, of course, right, as a coach, because you lose it. I lost it more as a younger coach than I did as an older coach. But, her mentorship gave me the confidence that this stuff was so important. And then I will tell you, and I almost forgot about this, but it's so impactful. When I was 32 years old, I was diagnosed with breast cancer out of the blue. And I was in amazing shape. My body fat was next to nothing. She, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I would go to her office and we would image. We would visualize. I call it mental rehearsal now, but I would visualize knocking the cancer cells out of my body. And I don't know, research will tell you that you can increase your blood count, your red blood cell count by visualizing and things like that. But it gave me control. It reminded me that I had agency. I can help me make better decisions. It calmed me, right? It took my stress level down. And through that, I thought, you know what? If it's important enough to use in those kinds of situations, then why are we not doing this all the time? Right? So that's where it really started. And then I got to Akron, and we had sports psychologists, but they were also our psychologists. And that's a hard, we had good ones, really good ones. But if they're talking to the kids about their problems, it's really hard to bring them in and have them do team stuff too. Like, that's a real tough line to follow, because every time I was talking to the sports psychologist, I think the kids thought I was talking about them, right? And I wasn't, because you're not allowed to. But it's like that's hard. So we didn't really have that influence so much at Akron, but we still, we had imagery, we had like a visualization station. We would do things sometimes after we got our butts kicked. Of course, we would kick into things, but we peppered it in, not enough, but we peppered it in probably more than most people do through my career there. And then once I was out of coaching, I'm like, okay, this is where my passion is. So let's just run full steam into it.
So how does, you talked about the certification. How does the certification work? Because I feel like a lot of people may not know that there is an actual certification for something like this. So how does that work? Is there like classes for it and like kind of stuff like that?
Well, there's all kinds of different, like there are lots of different certifications that you can do. You can be a CMP, so certified mental performance coach, and that's based on some of your college classes, and then and go through a certification, sort of like what people do to be a strength coach, right? Sort of the same kind
Okay.
of thing. And then there's a guy named Brian Kane, who I know Dan and Chad, I think, have done it. I've done it too. So I've gone through a couple different programs because I've just wanted to keep learning. He does something called Mental Performance Mastery, and you can go and get a certification, if you will. I don't not necessarily recognized by any board or anything like that, but like mental performance really isn't. It's not like you get a certification like at CPA, right? It's not exactly like that, but this schooling, but you can also get a master's degree in sports psychology, right? And that's where, that's something that when I was in college, you couldn't get a degree in sports psychology. That wasn't even an option. But it is now, and I actually, some of the students that I have, and one of the kids that is on the coaching staff here that coaches my son's team, that's what he's going to do, right? He's going to be a sports psychologist. But then there are other certifications that you can do as well. To be a certified mindset coach, to be a certified mental performance coach, whatever it is. But anything that to get into this without having any kind of instruction is sort of crazy if you think about it, because you've got to learn from someone who has done it, quite honestly. So but yeah, immediately. So I started my certification, I think it was in June of 2019. My last year of coaching at Akron was May 2019, and then I knew, like, right away, boom, here we go. Let's get some education and add it to what I have, and get going here.
One of the things I want to touch on too, real quick, is we talked about it off air before we started recording, but you said you just wanted to keep learning.
Yeah.
That's something that I feel like it almost slips a little bit, especially maybe after college or even after high school, or after you get into the flow of things and we kind of
Yeah.
quit learning. That's why I'm a big proponent. That's why I do this podcast. I'm a big guy that I love people to read. I tell people to read. A lot of people like to read their fictional stories. I think it's very important to read a nonfiction book in there every once in a while, something that you can learn from, whether it's Peterson or there's all kinds of books out there that you can read that I think are very good for you and can truly help you. And how important is it? Do you touch on that in terms of with your mental performance training and stuff, and you can never stop learning, or is that just kind of touch on the importance of just to keep learning?
It's when I was at Cleveland State, my boss, my last few years there, his name's Lee Reed. He's the athletic director at Georgetown now. What an amazing human being, and we had a great relationship. He said, every time I came into his office, he's like, "You're always reading something. You're always learning something. You're always coming in with a new idea." Excuse me. And I was a much better coach when I was reading, when I was learning, because it made me question what I was doing, and it made me, try new things. Leadership books, whatever, culture books, whatever it was. And it's interesting because after I became a mother, my reading habits changed a little bit. And I think if I can look at some of the way that things go up and down, if you're making graphs of everything, the less I read, the worse coach I was, quite honestly. And I think that in some ways I had to get back into it. I sort of felt that at some point in my career where you need, like, I'm a lifelong learner. My mom was, I know I got it from her. And when you read, as I said, you're constantly questioning what you already know, which makes you question what else is out there. Every morning when I work out, I start my workout on the Stairmaster just to get loose. So that's about 15 minutes, and I'd read the whole time. And I get through. You can't believe how many books I get through just reading, at least at the minimum 15 minutes a day, right? I mean, I'm constantly reading research. And I think that's what. And I write a tip every Monday, a Mindset Made Simple tip that I send out to people all over the country, about 20,000 people every Monday. And the reason I continue to do that is because it forces me to learn something different to share with other people, right? Like right now, I'm stuck on this. It's called contagious collapse, where teams just sort of implode, right? There's not a ton of research on it out there, but I want to do some because you've seen this where teams just all of a sudden sort of just throw in the towel. It's like, this is your experience. What are you doing? Right? But there's so much behind it, and I want to learn more about it so I can help my teams avoid that. Right? I mean, if we can do that, think about how many seasons you can salvage. Right? But that's what I'm reading about right now. So you got me on something I'm really actually have gotten extremely passionate about over the last month. So yeah.
Yeah, it's it's funny that you mentioned you just how many books you read in just 15 minutes a day. We were just talking about this at work today. We were sitting there talking, and I was talking about the book I was currently reading, or I just finished, and I told my boss, I was like, I'm gonna bring it in. I feel like you'll like it, because we text about reading all the time, and he was one of the guys that works with us. He was like, we were like, you need to read more, because he doesn't read very often. And he was like, I know, I just don't have time. And we're like, take your screen time off your phone and split it in half. Take half of that screen time and spend that time reading. And he was like, yeah, that's a very good point. It's like, yeah, if you take that screen time, and even if you take a quarter of it, because I guarantee most people have more than 2 hours of screen time a day. So if you take some of that screen time and you put it towards reading, that's one thing me and my boss were talking about today too. Like the other weekend, I spent the entire day just reading a book, and I finished the whole book, and it was like great. You know, I'm a slower reader. I'm not somebody that my girlfriend can read a 500-page book in 2 days, 2 nights, and it takes me, 2 months to read a 500-page book. But it's taking the phone away and reading. It's something that it truly, and I honestly felt way better that entire day, just because one, you accomplish something, and two, you're not spending it, watching TV, looking at your phone, spending it on a computer, whatever it is, playing video games. You're actually, even though you're inside, and it's the winter months, so this is like the best time to read too, because you don't really necessarily want to be outside. So it's nice to just grab a book and sit there and read. And it truly is something that really does help. I like that you talked about the correlation too of the whole thing with, when you weren't reading, you weren't as good as a coach. And when you said that originally, I was trying to correlate, like understand how, but when you mentioned the whole thing of like, it's kind of challenging you, it makes sense. And I'm like, and then I started correlating it to my own life, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it really does. If I took all the social media apps except LinkedIn off of my phone, and now when I go to my phone, I can choose to go to Kindle.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And even if it's just those 2 minutes, I can I just finished a book called The Choice Point. It's very good. It talks about functional imagery training, and just even if you throw 2 minutes in here and 2 minutes in there, right? And then it picks up on my iPad. Like I go and go to the page that you're on. Right? It's not like I don't do any work. It's just, but it also takes you out of the stuff that is like what. Like I heard something said one time. They said, pulling up X or pulling up Facebook or all these different things, and you read the stuff that ticks you off. It's like walking through a pile of dog crap instead of walking around it on the sidewalk. And I fell into that, particularly around before the election. Like, and it was just making me not a happy person. Like, why am I doing this to myself? I could be reading. I could be learning and adding to my craft instead of wasting my time about the stuff that you got to know where you should stand up and fight, right? You should know that. But on the other hand, it's like I'm like wasting energy all over the place. It's not helping anybody.
Getting angry about somebody else's tweet do for you. I mean, and that's the thing too. People are really bad about, and I've been guilty of this myself. It's big in the politics side of things, but even with other things like Ohio State football or something like that, where they'll see a post they don't like, and what do? They click on the comments, and that's just going to make you even angrier. So why are you reading the comments? It's better to just scroll past it. If you're choosing to scroll, it's better just to ignore it, because it's giving it the time of day. One, you're giving that person that posted that exactly what they wanted.
That's
and
right.
two, you're just wasting your time.
Yeah. I get sucked into those, because I have all these parent groups of, parent sport groups. I get sucked into the stupid stuff that they post on those things. It's like, oh my gosh. And I want to comment so often, and I don't, because I know it's not good for your reputation and it's just a waste of time. But I read the paper every morning, like literally the physical paper. We still get the paper delivered. And what I notice, if I'm reading something that I don't like, I just skip off like
Hmm.
immediately in the paper. But you don't do that on social media for some reason. Like you just force yourself to finish it.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah, so having the reading app, Libby and Kindle, they're there too. It's just, it sort of does that same dopamine hit, right? You've got something, but it's a better dopamine hit because you're accomplishing something. You
Right.
always feel good when you finish a book. Like I feel good about,
It's
and I'm
awesome.
like, and then you're talking about something that's productive with other people too, right?
Yeah.
I
Some
read
of the
the book.
best conversations I think me and my boss have had are about a book.
Yeah, absolutely. But think about the relationship you're building there,
Exactly.
right? Yeah, absolutely. That's huge.
So kind of going more into the sports, mental training, what
Yeah.
is mental training? Like what comes with it? What do you like, I guess, focus on inside terms of it?
Well, my sort of, I guess, little 30-second elevator speech would be I am trying to help people use their talent and their training to their fullest. And it's based on thinking about, not thinking more, but thinking about how our thinking affects our performance. Because how we think turns into how we feel, and how we feel turns into how we behave. And how we behave affects our performance, because really performance is a behavior, right? Just like communication is a behavior. And our how we perform obviously directly impacts our results. It doesn't decide our results, but it impacts our results. So if you took an S curve that went through there, you would see that we started with thoughts and then we came to results, and it just sort of winds through this sort of system, but it all goes right back to how you're thinking. And if we don't, if we aren't aware of how our thoughts affect our emotions, um, our physiology, right, our choices, then there's a lot left on the table for us to work on. Because the way I think directly affects what I'm going to do. And what I'm going to do directly affects whether I make the right choice, whether I'm in the right position, whether I communicate what I see, all the things that are important for me to show up and perform at my best.
One of the things I guess I thought of at the time when you were speaking about this was the fact that, it's a newer thing that is slowly, really progressing in terms of the sports world with the mental side of things. I don't remember it much as when I was an athlete younger as in youth sports and side of things, but it was there in touches in terms of like, I remember baseball. It was like, if you don't believe you can hit the ball, you're not going to hit the ball. It's
Right.
very unlikely that you're going to do it. So I remember, a coach telling me that when I was young and like that kind of stuff. You like, and it's almost, and if you don't think it, you're not going to be able to do it. Is that something that you guys, I know you mentioned the visioning and
Yeah.
or visualization side of things. Obviously, that's
Right.
something you guys, stress. And is that one of the most important things, or what would you say is kind of the most important thing if you could narrow it down to one type of thing?
Well, I do think, and I'm going to validate exactly what you said. I think the most important tool that everyone should be introduced to is mental rehearsal, visualization, imagery, whatever you want to call it, because we all see pictures in our head, right? And our brain does not know the difference in whether we're actually doing something or whether we're imagining it. Now, slight differences, obviously. But so one thing that I visualize all the time is when my morning workouts, I visualize my bar coming up straight on a power clean, right? Because I know that if it doesn't come up straight, I mean, I'm old, right? I'm going to be hurt tomorrow if that's the case, right? So I visualize that all the time before I do it, even in between, like as the bar's in my hand. And what's crazy about that is that as I'm imagining it, as I'm rehearsing it, the muscles that are engaged in that movement are being sort of stimulated, if you will. They think they're doing it. And they're sending like blueprints to my body for it to remember what to do the next time. It is such an amazing tool. I use it everywhere I go to speak. I just got to speak at the National Fast Pitch Coaches Association. It was one of my goals when I first started this. I just spoke in December, but I pictured where I was going to be. I tried to find pictures of the rooms online so I could see what they were like. I picture having my lapel mic. I picture with my slides and my clicker in my hand, and before I have conversations, right? So it's really just sort of letting me get there before I'm there. Drew Brees says it's like having the answers to the test before the test. And when because when you get there, you're under some pressure, your amygdala goes sort of crazy in your brain, turns off your prefrontal cortex, so you can't think as well. But if I've already imagined myself there, it sort of quiets that a little bit. Am I still going to be nervous? Heck yeah. I'm talking in front of my colleagues, right? I have a Pitt coach, Notre Dame coach, the Michigan coaches, they're all there. I mean, I've known some of them for, decades, and I'm nervous. But I'm confident because I've watched myself do it, right? I've practiced. And that tool, if you really dig into the science of it, we are crazy not to use it. And that should be something I think should be a part of every young kid's sort of skill set, their toolbox. Good confidence building.
I wanted to ask, how important is the mental side, mental performance training with youth athletes? How important is it with youth athletes? Do you feel it's more important with a youth athlete versus maybe an older athlete? I know it has its, a purpose for everybody, but how important is it for youth athletes?
Well, I think it's important for every stage. I meet every Friday at 8 a.m. I take a call from a CEO of a major nonprofit. Like, she's sitting with the governor every week, right? She was the president of a college, and we talk about this same stuff, right? But for these younger kids, I just got a text from a friend of mine from Atlanta. He's got a third and fourth grade basketball team. He's like, "Are they too young?" I'm like, "No, we can lay some foundation." Right? Because here's what I would start with them. I would talk about what they imagine, because they're imagining things. Didn't you used to imagine when you were a kid? Like, I mean, I imagined catching a pass from Terry Bradshaw, right? I mean, that was before your time. But like, I used to picture, making the game-winning shot.
Exactly.
You're constantly doing that as a kid. But where I would start with young kids, and it's really important for them, is to have them start to think about, how many times a day do you think about what you're trying to avoid? Right? You never go to a restaurant and tell them what you don't want. You go to the restaurant and you order what you want. But throughout the whole day, you're like, don't look stupid. Don't swing at the high pitch. Don't drop the ball. Don't fumble. Right? Don't false start. Right? All the things that you don't miss the open receiver. Right? That's how we talk to ourselves. And if at a young age they can start to notice that, think about where they're going to be when they're 13. Right? They're going to start like getting them to talk about what they want. I think that's that tool, and the tool of mental rehearsal. Any age kid can learn that. My son, who's not a very good baseball player, he's a very good swimmer. we worked on baseball today in the basement, but I don't push, because he's going to figure it out on his own. He wanted to, but before they put him in a pitch one day, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going to die. Right? This is not going to be good. But before he did anything, he stopped, he closed his eyes, he took a deep breath, and he let it out. And I know what he was picturing. He was picturing throwing the ball over the plate, because he listens to me talk every day. Right? And I thought, man, and he was like 9. I've got a video of it on my YouTube channel. It's like the most, I was sat there, I was like, boom, right? But it's like that, any kid can do that at 9 or 10. If we're going to run them through the paces of trying to win a game at 9 or 10, and we're going to put that as the goal, then we better be learning how to manage pressure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, especially like you mentioned, when you're a kid, you're thinking of what you want to avoid, all the bad things, all the things you don't want to have happen. It comes with that. You don't want to be that kid in school. You want to be the popular. You want to be cool. You want everyone to like you. So you're trying to avoid doing the things. But I was thinking while you were talking too, talking about what you want, and it was like, you do have some parents that maybe negate that. It takes you have some parents that are like, tell you your dreams are crazy.
Yeah,
Keep talking about it, because there's gonna
that's
be that
right.
one person that believes in you. Because
That's right.
I can't tell you how many people, when I told that I was starting a podcast or that I had a podcast, they were like, "What, you?" Because I was the quiet kid. I wasn't one that was, talkative and things like that. Now you
Yeah,
probably can't get me to be quiet, but
that's a
it's
good
just
thing.
one of those things that when you find something you want to do, just keep talking about it. Eventually,
Yeah.
somebody's going to be like, "Wait a second," or either they're doing the same thing too, or they will do believe it. They see it.
Right, you attract that, right?
Hmm.
There's a thing called a reticular activating system at the bottom of your brainstem, and it notices four things. It notices threat, it notices when someone calls your name, it notices when someone's interested in you, and it notices what you think is important, right? Think about it. You buy a new car, you realize everybody in the whole world's got the dang car. You never even realized that the car was there before. And now everybody drives a silver Mercedes or whatever it is, right? But like when you keep talking about what you want, you find ways to attract opportunities, right? At night, I write down three things that I'm grateful for. I don't do it every night anymore, but I did it like for 3 years. I did it religiously. And maybe I should start it back up tonight. But I write down three things I'm grateful for. And then the other thing I would write down was my affirmation. I am the leading mental performance coach in college athletics, right? Am I that? No. But every night, and I didn't believe it every night, right? And I didn't believe that it was something I could reach for, or that I would ever get there. But I wrote it down every night because it made me think of what I needed to do tomorrow to get one step closer to that, right? And people can tell you you're crazy, and yeah, everybody wants to play at Alabama, everybody wants to play at Oklahoma, but right? And not everybody's going to be able to do that. But in the meantime, what are you opening up an opportunity to do, right? Instead of saying like, I don't want to, I hope nobody's going to recruit me, or I'm afraid I'm not going to get recruited. Why are we talking about that? Let's talk about I want to get recruited. And then if I think about how I want to get recruited, that sort of leads me to think, well, if I want to get recruited, I better do something to get myself recruited, right? So it's just a total different mindset, really, talking about what you want.
I broke my elbow my senior year of high school, and I did think for a minute, there goes college. I'm not going to
Yeah,
be able to go play in college. Instead, I started emailing all of the college coaches that I had been in contact with already and
yep,
telling them, hey, you're not going to see film of me. I broke my elbow, and like telling them the situation and kind of putting, I'm still interested if this is something. I went on to play. It was at the D3 level, but I still went on to
me
play
too.
college athletics. So
Yeah,
it's one of those things that it's whatever you put yourself into, if you keep going towards that. And that's where
yeah,
I think I don't know if I've released it yet or not, but I mentioned in a solo episode, and when I talked about goals, I think it's very important in terms of goals. You have to write them down and put them
yeah,
somewhere you see them every day, because if you
yeah,
see them every day, it's kind of that visualization thing. You're gonna think about it. You're gonna see yourself achieving that. Whether it is read 10 books a year, read 20 books a year, or lose X amount of weight. When you see lose X amount of weight, you envision yourself as that weight. You
yeah,
start to see it. One of
yeah,
the things that I had somebody on the podcast say one time that I really liked, and it kind of sparked the thought when you were talking about everybody wants to play at Alabama, Oklahoma. You may not get there, but he said, shoot for the stars, you may end up on the moon.
that's
You
right.
may be trying to go for this big thing, and you may not get to that big thing. It's very hard to get to that level. Not everybody's going to do it. It's not
No,
meant for everybody. You may land short of it, but it's still the moon, so that's still pretty freaking cool.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. You think, okay, I didn't coach at Oklahoma, I didn't coach at Ohio State, I coached at Cleveland State and Akron, two mid-major schools. I was one of 297 people in the country at the time that had that job, a Division I
For
softball coach. Think
26
about that.
years.
For 26 years. I mean, think about that. And uh, it was the greatest job ever, right? You ended up you played at your school. You're one of 6% of high school students that play at the next level. Everybody. I think a lot of people poo-poo Division III, and it's like, no, listen, this is an opportunity to change your life, right? My cousin's daughter plays basketball at Baldwin Wallace, and they're really good. And they've lost one game. They go to the Sweet 16 all the time. Coach Hare just won her 700th game, and she's amazing. The kid's not playing, And they're thinking about her not going, maybe not going back. I'm like, no, 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 no. Because this is what people want to talk to you about. When I was in Leadership Akron, when I first came back to Akron, I went through Leadership Akron, which they take 34 leaders from around the county or the area, and it was bank CEOs and all the police chief and all these high level people, and me, the softball coach from Akron. You know what everybody wanted to talk about? Sports. Everybody wanted to talk about sports. So it's me with all the guys around me talking about sports, right? And it was like, you think about the privilege that you have to play those extra 4 years, and it changes your job opportunities. It changes your work ethic. I mean, it's the most valuable experience for your life. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I can tell you a lot of people do, bash D3 sports. There's still a lot of talent at the D3 level. I can tell you that for a fact, because I remember my very first game and being put on my backside from the very first play of my college career. It was an eye opener, and we did play against kids that did play D1, and a lot of kids were like, "How did they not go D1?" Because
That's right.
they were that good. And there's
because
a lot
there
of talent out
spots,
there,
right?
Yeah,
there aren't
exactly.
enough spots for everybody to play at that level. I mean, I caught a Division I pitcher. She set the national strikeout record. I mean, I may have been able to play. I had some offers from Division I just for softball, but I was not a Division I basketball player. There's no way. I'm slow and I can shoot, but my feet weren't that good. So but like, there is no doubt. Like our center fielder, she was a Division I athlete, no doubt. I'm not sure why people look down on it. I think it's just because of the media and parents. Everybody talks up Division I. They want their kid going there, and then they sort of overlook these opportunities, and you're giving up so much when you don't look at it. I never coached a Division III. I always coached Division I, but I ran my program like a Division III program because I thought there's value in it, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, but there's an opportunity. There's so much opportunity, and a college athlete is a college athlete.
You're right. Kind of going back to the youth side of things too, what are your thoughts on multi-sports athletes? Is it good or bad? Obviously, I have a feeling that you're going to say good, as you were a multi-sport athlete in college, but kind of what are your thoughts on it, and how can it help or hurt an athlete?
I just had this conversation the other day with a guy here at the pool. And there's a guy named Michael Blair. He was a Chicago Bear. He still is with the NFL and their alumni. Excuse me. He owns a gym in Chicago. I've done a couple camps with him. Super awesome guy. He owns a gym in Chicago, and they teach. This is genius. They teach kids movement first. So basically, they learn football, right? They learn football footwork. Because you think about every sport, maybe except swimming, uses football footwork. Right? You got to be able to drop step. You got to be able to do, you got to be able to go to the side. You got to be able to run laterally. You got to do all these different things. And the only reason I bring that up is because if you are truly going to be a great athlete, you need to play more than one sport. You got to teach your body to do something different. And if you're the best baseball player, but you play basketball and you're not the best basketball player, you're learning something different there too. Right? Because I guarantee you at some point you're not going to be the best baseball player, and you got to figure out how to deal with that. That's why I have a job, right? But the bottom line is that we discourage multi-sport athletes because of the amount of practice time that people think they need. Like even my son, right? So he's 12, and they want him to swim 5 nights a week. Nope. We do 4 because he does love it. And then when he goes to the next group, it's 6 days a week. He'll be 13. It's like, okay. They like him to swim through the spring. No, we're going to run track and play baseball, right? And we're going to run cross country in the spring. He doesn't really like contact sports. Football does not bring him joy. That's what he told me. And I'm like, oh, dang it. I love football. But you never know what your kids are going to be. They set their own path. But the things you learn in the different, every sport has a different culture,
mm-hmm.
right? And learning all those things makes you a better athlete. I think every kid I can say that played for us at Akron in particular, I would say that probably the same at Cleveland State, but every single one of them was a dual sport high school athlete. Some of them, one of them wrestled. We had swimmers. We had lots of basketball players, obviously. I watched a lot of them play basketball because I wanted to see what kind of athlete they were, right?
Hmm.
We had, we had some volleyball players, you name it, but they all played more than one sport.
Yeah, I actually I think I heard it on Urban Meyer. He was talking about it on his podcast where he
Mm,
mentioned, when it came to especially offensive linemen, when we were recruiting offensive linemen, we didn't necessarily want to see them play football. He's like, if they played basketball, I went to their basketball game.
yeah,
That really got to
yep,
show me their footwork. That really got to show me
that's
how
right.
they move and that kind of stuff. And it's the same. My college coaches, I was already committed when I went to Ohio Wesleyan. And I was already committed, but they never watched me play a single football game. But they came and watched me play in a tournament basketball game. Now,
Yeah,
granted, I don't know if it was good or bad that I was fouled out almost by the first half. That may have been a good thing with being a football guy, but
that's right.
yeah, it was. I don't know. It was a fun time, but it's. I think multi-sport athletes. I feel like. Do you feel like you're starting to see less or more and more single sport athletes nowadays, or do you think there's still that giant range of multi-sport athletes?
I think there is a range, but I think it is fewer because I think it's harder. I think coaches make it hard um, to do. We say we want it, but we don't adapt for it.
Right.
Every college coach in the country wants a dual sport athlete. Every single one. I've never talked to one college coach, and I talk to college coaches every single day, that thinks that sports specialization is good. And part of it, like, the things changed so immensely in my 26 years, particularly with injury, right? We had so many more overuse injuries at the end than we did at the beginning because people put their glove away for a while and they put on their high tops, right? And they played volleyball in the fall. I mean, I had Amy Kyler, who's the head coach at Cleveland State now, and Tennille Whiteside and Amy Jowert. I had three dual sport athletes at Cleveland State at Division I, right? And Amy Kyler and Tennille Whiteside, the two volleyball, softball, they both played pro softball. Like, they're athletes. And then Amy Jowert, who was the basketball softball player, she was an academic All-American in both sports. Like, I mean, these are high level athletes. They were the best athletes. Those were probably the three best athletes I ever coached in my entire career. I had some really good ones, but they were probably the best. But all of the, there's so much to it. In one of my books, I think it's called, the Wade Gilbert's book. It's called Coaching Better Every Season. They talk about people that make national teams played more than one sport through high school. The majority of people that make national teams were dual sport athletes. Think about that for just a second. It goes against what the culture is telling you.
Hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of people think that you have to focus on one sport, but you don't. I mean, I always loved my reason for playing basketball was it kept me in shape for football,
That's
and
why I
now
ran
there
cross
was a lot
country.
of
Yeah.
yeah, there was a lot of other things that obviously led into or helped me with football and basketball on both sides of things. But I kind of wanted to talk too a little bit, with people playing multiple sports, these younger athletes, sometimes nowadays, especially, you're getting athletes that are maybe, softball can be year round almost nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
And, softball season, travel softball and things like that might overlap with, say, basketball season. What are your thoughts on playing two sports at the same time, for say,
Ooh.
and if you had, it also could come up with the whole thing of you might have a tournament for softball that weekend here, but you also have a basketball game. So, like, how do you pick which one that you go to? And I kind of want your thoughts on it as a youth athlete and just kind of go off the youth side of things.
Wow. Gosh. My experience with youth sport is a lot less, obviously, than my experience with college sports, but I'm into it now because of my kid. But that's hard. And I hear people balancing that all the time. I do a USA softball program, our high performance program in our region. I just got an email from a parent today. It says, my daughter has volleyball on the weekends that, the identifier for the national, get to the national level. And I guess she'll just have to miss it this year. I'm like, well, like, you're committed to your program. That's good. That's the hard part, is like, who do you give up if you're
Mm-hmm.
doing two things at once? I remember my dad. So my dad was a high school track coach. He coached tennis, and but he said, like, his girls would play soccer during track season, and they were really good. Like, he had some, he had kids go on to the USA track. He had lots of kids went on and played in college or ran track in college. they would, play soccer during track, and you think about the wear and tear on your body. Like, when are you resting? I think now we're coming to more, and this is something that I'm not good at, recovery. I'm not good at recovery. It's not part of who I am, but I need to. But like, I think we're learning more and more about that, and then and then the mental wear and tear. Like, when we're tired, everything is harder, and it affects our responses mentally and physically. So I don't know. I wouldn't. I don't know if I'm against playing two things at once, but I think it's hard.
Yeah.
Because you're sort of shorting somebody, unless you have a perfect agreement. Then hey, I'm not going to. You lay it out at the beginning. I'm not going to be here these times. But then like, I don't know. There's always the parents then they get ticked because you weren't there. Now you come back and you're playing. It's like all this. If it was just in a vacuum, it'd be easy, but it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I feel youth sports, it's a little tougher because especially with the, they're becoming the travel side of things becoming bigger. But I think like once you get to that high school level or college level, especially like whatever
Yeah.
season you're in is kind of the
You're
one
in.
you have to focus on that one.
Yeah.
And it's tough as a youth because they may be like we talked, they may be playing basketball because it helps with this or helps
Yeah.
with whatever other sport. So it is a tough thing to balance. I kind of wanted to also touch on the travel side of things, like travel ball, because you were a D1 coach,
Yep.
for many years. How important is travel ball versus rec ball with youth? Because growing up, we didn't have a ton of travel ball. At least I didn't play a ton of travel ball. I played some travel baseball. I played some AAU basketball. Obviously, I was a football guy, so there's not really travel football like leagues out there.
Right.
So it wasn't big, for me, but it's becoming a bigger thing. Like AAU has always been big, and it's getting really
Yeah.
big. Obviously,
Yeah.
we have a lot of travel softball nowadays. How important is travel ball versus rec ball?
Travel ball is where the recruiting really happens. But and it's interesting because I had the opportunity to be in the car with Kat Osterman for about an hour and a half. I don't know who Kat is, but she's one of the best pitchers Team USA has ever seen. She All American from Texas. But we were driving to the airport after the national identifier for USA softball, and we were talking about what she does. She lives in Austin, and she runs the RBI, which is a major league program, the RBI softball and baseball in the Austin area. These are this for low income kids that really can't afford travel ball. That's the hard part, right? It's like it's ridiculous the amount of
Mm-hmm.
money that's spent. I run softball camps, and I think I run really good softball camps. I use all my connections, obviously, with my college coaching buddies to come in and do all the instruction. So there are opportunities to be seen outside of travel ball, and if you're really good, someone's going to find you. But the truth of it is that's where we did pretty much the bulk of our recruiting was in the summer, right? In the fall, which I hated because we're trying to take care of our own team, and everybody
Mm-hmm.
thought we should be out watching other people too. But yeah, travel ball it's important. I think it's out of hand in a lot of ways. I don't think that they should be playing every weekend. Coaches can only be out certain weekends. I think that'd be a good time for people to take a break
Yeah.
and do something different. But I mean, if you want to be seen, you got to get in front of people, and that's where it happens.
What age would you say is the time that you can really start maybe getting a gauge on whether an athlete is fit for D1? I know obviously everybody's kind of different. Some people, go through maturity at different times. So what age do you think is like the age where it like maybe that's when you should start getting into travel ball if you're, you're a good athlete and something that you want to pursue?
Well, my former assistant, Julie Pratt, who's the head coach at Oberlin College now, we made a pact that we weren't going to spend money on a hotel for our kids until they were at least in the 8th grade. I will tell you though, I went to Pittsburgh last weekend for a swim meet as the only one, and I'm not doing it again. I can tell you that we're not doing it again until maybe his freshman year or whatever, if he really, I don't know, but. The pressure, like, we've got these 8U, 10U, and all the, they're playing 70 games a summer. I think that's too much. I really do. How do you know when a kid is really a Division I athlete? Uh, there are a few kids that you can tell when they're 14, 13. Like there's a kid named Rachel Terrio who played basketball in Nebraska. She would come to our camps when I was at Cleveland State, and I knew that she and her buddy Logan were going to be big time athletes, and they were, right? But the best 12-year-old isn't always the best 17-year-old. In fact, most of the time they're not.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way that it works. But it's sort of between that sophomore and junior year, particularly for girls, because girls' bodies change. Like my dad said, if you go to the state track meet, you're going to see a lot of freshmen and sophomores winning, and after that, they don't win again. Right? Their body changes, their hips change. They don't get faster all the time. Pure athletes do, right? But there's almost like a pass up range, and I can't statistically or scientifically give you what it is, and it's different for a little bit for everybody. But I think when we started recruiting kids younger, right, when we started signing sophomores and freshmen, back in the day here, not too long ago, people were making mistakes. The later we can sign kids, the more you know what you're getting,
Mm-hmm.
quite frankly, right? I remember Fred Worth was our assistant baseball coach at Akron. He's been all over the place. He says, I don't recruit a guy until he's got a driver's license and a girlfriend. Because until those two things happen, you don't know if he loves baseball or not, right? And I think that goes even more now with these kids that start so young. And then by the time they get to 16, in some ways they're like, what am I doing? Or why? Or they forgot their why, right? And then they're doing it because their parents put all this money into it now, and they're afraid to not do it in a way. That's not everybody, of course, but there are
Right.
enough. There are enough.
I do believe burnout is kind of a real thing. I mean,
It is.
especially you're starting to see some of these young athletes, like you said, playing 70 games in a summer. That's a lot. I get maybe if you're like one of the top teams, like, you're winning the College World Series, like you're the Little League World Series, whatever, or you're winning these big AAU tournaments. Because that's what happened with me with basketball. Honestly, I got kind of tired of playing, 10 games in a weekend. It was just too much for me, and I still played, but I was like, I'm not doing the travel side of things anymore because like the body, the wear and tear, and just like I kind of lost the love and the why.
Yeah. Yep. 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 It happens. It happens like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't even realize you don't really even know that you're burnt out until you're burnt out. Like I think I suffered it as a coach, quite honestly. I think I suffered some burnout as a coach, and I didn't realize it until I was on the other side of it. Quite honestly, it sneaks up on you, I think kids do suffer from it. I really
Mm-hmm.
do. I really do. Yep.
So kind of going back to the mental stuff, I wanted to ask, what is one thing that every single person could be doing right now to increase their mental performance? If there's one little thing, one little tip that you could give, what would it be?
Before you go and do something that is important, talk about what it is that you're going to do, right? Just that simple, right? If you're walking up to the plate, you talk about what you're going to do. I'm going to look for this pitch. I'm going to, whatever it is. I mean, that sounds so simple, but we don't do that, right? We're worried about what everybody else is thinking. We're worried about everything else is going on, but just simply, okay, or have something in your, like something I talk about with a lot of the athletes I work with. I have them put something in their pocket. I call it back pocket notes, right? What are the three things that when you get distracted, that if you come back to these three things, you're going to be back on track, right? You don't even have to pull it out. You know what it says. You can touch your back pocket. You can just think about having it back in there. You can pull it out and read it. But your back pocket notes can keep you on track when you get hijacked, because you're going to get hijacked. There's no doubt about it. So that's one really simple thing. And then the other thing just before you do it, watch it, right? Before you do it, watch it. I use a tool I call deliberate rehearsal. And coaches, nothing ticks a coach off more than number 15 kid in the line coming up and saying, what are we doing? Right? It's like, oh, for crying out loud, what have you been doing? Like all your buddies just went ahead of you, and where were you? Right? But this deliberate rehearsal can be really helpful. Coach tells you what to do or what they expect. You say it either back to them or you say it in your head. Like, okay, so I was out at Portland State. They're one of my teams. I work out there in the preseason for basketball. And I remember Keith and the assistant coach like pulling one of the kids by the jersey and said, "You're like, you need to be on this spot, right? When she moves there, you move here." So right then and there, I told this kid, "Okay, what did he just tell you to do? Say it back to him. And then imagine it and then do it." Because now, by the time you've done it, that's 3 times, right? Because you said it, so you're picturing it. You're picturing it, so you're like your brain thinks you're doing it, and now you're doing it. Like these tools couldn't be any more simple, right?
It's the little things, like you mentioned, it's a lot of, sometimes it's easy to skip over these things, but it's the little things. And I like to go back to try to climb a ladder. Imagine taking out all the steps of the ladder. All you have is the bottom one and top one. If you just try to go straight to the top of a ladder, it's not going to be easy. Those little steps are very important in climbing a ladder. And that's essentially what you are doing in terms of this. And, going back to football side of things, I can think back to college now, looking at, you talked about there's 3 times that you saw something, and it was one of those. In the first time we got a report on a team, we got a paper, we got to watch it on film. We practiced it all week at practice. We saw it all week at practice, the same thing over and over and over again. Like, I'm pretty sure some of the plays I saw 100 times in a week. And then, Thursday or Friday night before the game, you watch it again on film, you get that last report and you're looking at it again. Saturday morning, I'm looking at that paper on my way to the field, and you're just constantly seeing it. The more you see it, the easier it becomes.
You're like literally sending like blueprints to your muscles, right? They've done research on people who imagine playing a passage on a piano and someone who's actually doing it, and the same part of your brain lights up. Your motor cortex lights up exactly the same. So every time you picture that, that's one of the things that I talk about with my basketball teams in particular. Okay, when you're watching film and you're watching the other team, put yourself in there, right? Or if you're injured and you're on the sidelines and if you're the post, then go stand behind the post, and everywhere when the ball comes to her, imagine what you would be doing in that situation, right? Because if you imagine what you'd be doing in that situation, your body is practicing it, like literally practicing it. Otherwise, you're standing over by the water cooler talking to the trainer, and you're not even in it, right? But all the little things that I mentioned, if nothing else, they're keeping you present. Right? They're keeping you engaged. They're keeping you not thinking about what other people are thinking or what's going to happen, what if, right? You're imagining what you want to happen, and you got a much better chance of making it happen in that situation. Plain and simple. Plain and simple.
I remember our coaches always used to call them mental reps. Like, when we weren't in, you had to be watching your position and envisioning exactly what you would do. I remember one time we had a quarterback in college who, when he wasn't in, he was still dropping back like he had the ball. And it was like, at first you're like, what are you doing? And then it starts to click. He's literally envisioning, he's seeing himself, he's feeling it. Those muscles are being activated I'm doing exactly what he's doing out on the field. I just don't have the ball in my hands.
Right. There's an article about Drew Brees that he was injured and at home, and when he was playing with the Saints, and I can't remember who the quarterback was that was in, but he stood the whole game with the call sheet in his hand. He would picture what Sean Payton was going to call before he called it. He would run through it in his head, and then he would mimic basically what was going on the TV screen in front of him. So he was playing the game even though he wasn't in the game, right? I mean, he's getting reps even injured. It's genius.
Yeah, it's the mental side of things. I mean, obviously we could sit here and probably talk a lot more, but I kind of want to, move on to this, but it is really important what you are doing. I did want to ask too, one more thing. What age group do you prefer to work with, and what sports do you prefer to work with? I know you obviously work with multiple different sports, but if you had to pick one age group and one sport, what are they, and are they the same per se?
Gosh, that's hard because, I've got 12-year-olds that I love working with, and especially, after the couple years and you watch them then get to high school and, they're playing for a state championship. And, I've got 16-year-old swimmers that are like, I've got this female wrestler right now that's just absolutely killing it, and a swimmer who's like blowing it out of the water. He's like, but I mean, I love working with college teams because I like talking to the coaches as much as I do the teams, quite honestly. I love being a part of these programs, right? Like when Youngstown State won the championship last year, like I was a part of that, and and that is so exciting to be a part of all these different programs. What do I like the most? Well, I mean, I love talking with softball teams, of course, because I can talk the entire game, right? I can talk about all the details of the game. But I have found that I love working with football teams. I love it. There's something about the precision of football that mental tools fit into really, really well, right? And just the breakdown of reps, and how practice. Like I was at Oberlin College's football practice. That John Ponce, the coach there, he was at Akron when I was coaching there too. But I was at practice at I talked to him at 6 a.m. and then we went out to practice, and I was watching the long snapper and the punter, and it's just like all the little things that they can rehearse that is so valuable to the little precision that they need, right? I don't know. Football, football was something I would have loved to have played football as a human being. Wasn't an option, obviously, at my age. I will tell you, though, Amy Joward, who was the kid I told you about that played basketball and softball, she was her high school quarterback until she was a junior at Findlay,
Wow.
where Roethlisberger went to, not some little podunk little school at Findlay, right? But football was a great surprise to me. I thought they would sort of poo-pooed away, right? But the response it's awesome. But I love it. I mean, every sport has their own culture, and I've learned so much about the culture of every sport and the coaches. I mean, I love basketball. Obviously, I love basketball just as much, and soccer. I do a lot of work with soccer, tons of work with soccer teams, and I don't know as much about the beautiful game as I should, but it's as mental as anything.
Does your mental coaching change a little bit depending on the sport, or is it kind of very similar across the board?
I would say it's similar across the board. Obviously, I adjust it to the vernacular and the pace of the game, right? Because my game, my softball, it stops and starts and stops and starts, like golf, like tennis, right? Those kinds of things. Then swimming is like one and done. Like you better be ready when the gun goes, or you're in trouble, right? Same with my track athletes. So everything has to be adapted a little bit, but the tools remain the same. I use the same tools with Oswald Taylor's sales teams, right?
Okay.
And Ohio EPA and all the other places that I go and speak with businesses, because ultimately we're all wired the same, right? We don't like change. We got a negativity bias. We don't control our thoughts. We like to react without thinking sometimes. So the tools that we implement help us manage all those things that, to let our talent, our training come to the forefront.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, a lot of the sports most of them are start stop, but, like you said, some of them are one shot. You only have one opportunity. You don't always get that second chance for, say, in swimming. You might get that second chance, but it might not be for a year down the line, or,
right.
It might not be till the next weekend. Football, you could make a mistake and you have, 60 more minutes to make up for that mistake,
Right.
per se. So but it does make sense how, kind of we're all wired. We are all wired the same. Somebody is using, and that's what kind of sets us apart and that kind of stuff. But I kind of want to move into my final question that I have, that I like to ask all of my guests, and I'm very actually interested in this question. I don't know if you listen to Chad's episode or not, but you may know it's coming, and it is, if you could go back in time and tell your 16-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Gosh, it would be believe your dad, because he said to me years ago, and I've said it a million times, he says, Jewel, people aren't thinking about you nearly as much as you think they are because they're too busy thinking about themselves. And that's true. And I think that is one thing that as a 16-year-old, you need to remember, right? The other thing that I would tell myself as a coach is this. If you think you need to do it, do it. Just because you don't think somebody should get that or needs that, if you think for a second that you should be giving someone something, then do it. Because obviously, if I could go back, I would rewrite some things in my coaching. Some of the things that I did, not as much as, I wouldn't change everything for sure, but I would change less of what I did and more of what I didn't do. Like giving the kid that little extra affirmation or whatever it was, because I was like, you know what, they're okay. No, but if you feel like they need it, they probably need it, right? So like those are two things I think. And then maybe one last is life isn't that serious, right? I think I've gotten much better at relaxing. I was not, as a younger person, I was not very good at relaxing. And I think that is something that is vital for people to realize. You have to stop sometime and rest.
Yeah. Very hard to do, especially
Yes.
in your younger years. It's very tough to. I still am not great at it, but I've definitely gotten better at it throughout my lifetime. And it's like I remember right out of college, it was like just tense all the time, like go, go, go. And
Yeah.
everything had to be perfect and everything. And then once you kind of realize, one, you're not going to get everything perfect, and you slow
That's right.
down, it kind of starts to, you can take that breath. And it's like, I ventured into the world of video editing this year and this past year. And it was one of those where, I'm scared. When I sent my first video to my first client, it was like, I don't know how good this is. It doesn't look very good, I don't think. And, it's just one of those, I was like, it's not going to be perfect. And
right.
now I can go back to my first video, my second video, and watch the progress. And that's how it's going to be for everybody. Nobody
That's
starts
right.
on top of the mountain. You never
That's
start
right.
on top of the mountain. So you're going to start at the bottom, and it's all about the climb.
That's right. That's exactly right. If you wanted to be perfect, you're never going to put it out there. And then you've done nothing. Right? I've done that
What
to
fun is
myself too
that?
with my business. Right. With my business. Oh, that's not good. Is that good enough? Is that good enough? And it's like, okay, it's content. It's this. It's if it helps somebody, then it was good enough.
But I always say, as long as my podcast gets at least one view an episode, I will continue to put it out because I always tell people, whether you listen to the whole thing or not, I hope you got one thing from it that either made you laugh, you learned something. Like, I hope you got something positive out of it. That's my goal with the podcast. I'd love to have millions and millions of subscribers and views an episode. That's not the reality of it, but it's not why I do it. I don't do it for the views. I do it because I hope one person gets something from every single episode that I release.
Yeah, and if you change one person's mindset or choice or belief, then you've made progress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's just like the whole thing that I think his name is William McRaven or something, like he had to make your bed speech.
Yeah.
And it's like it making your bed, you could change the world. And it's like, if you'd never heard that speech, I highly recommend going and listening to it, because it just shows the aspect of one little thing or one little action there's a chain reaction to how many different things it could have an impact on. But Julie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you and follow you on social media or find your website and get in contact with you?
So thank you for allowing that. So my website is SSB, like smarter, stronger, better. So from my coaching days, ssbperformance.com. And every week I do put out a mental performance tip. So the Mindset Made Simple tip, you can go there. If you go to Mindset Tips or SSB Performance /blog, you'll find all those there. You can subscribe and you'll get it in your inbox. It's only one a week. You're not going to get spammed. I'm at SSB Mindset on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. And then SSB Performance on both Instagram and Facebook. So those are my social media tags. Also SSB Performance on YouTube, because I do post a video with each tip. So they're usually about 15 minutes long or so. So there are 233 of them at least. I do one every week for the past few years. So there's lots of content there. There's something there for every performer. And if you get something out of it, I feel like the same way that you do, right? That I've contributed in some way to making the world a better place.
Exactly. I feel like I need to get you, Dan, and Chad on a podcast, or maybe you guys should do your own podcast on top of that. But that would be a very interesting conversation to have you, Chad, and Dan. I'll mention it to them on Thursday when I record with them.
Good, I'm in. If you want to do that sometime, you just let me know.
I'll try and get that worked out, but be sure to look up SSB. I always want to call it. I don't forget what I want to call it, but SSB Performance. I highly recommend it. Just from this conversation, obviously I've done my research and looked through your social media and your website and everything, and I think it is something truly incredible and valuable that you are doing. So if you're interested in the mental training, definitely look at her website. I will have the links to her website and social media in the episode description if you guys want to go there, or just search it yourself. But until next time, you guys know the deal. Life is hard and is going to knock you down just like a bull does to a bull rider. Don't let the bull of life walk all over you. Get up, grab the bull by the horns, and take control of your life.